Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today, hosted jointly between Content and Code and Centric Software. From this webinar, we are hoping to show you everything you need to know to make your Office 365 decision. Before we begin, we are going to be running a little poll for everyone that's joined the webinar. We'd just be interested to know what made you join the webinar and tailor the content that we'll be sending out to you once this presentation is finished. If you can take the next couple of minutes to look through the questions and let us know what you're looking to achieve from today's session, how much you already know about Microsoft Office 365, how you're expecting to purchase any Microsoft Office 365 licenses, and your existing relationship with Microsoft. It would be great for us to understand what exactly you're looking for. So whilst you take some time to go through the poll, I'd like to introduce to you Richard Hogan, our Solutions Architect from Content and Code, who will be presenting this webinar with my colleague Dan Kirtley, our Product Marketing Manager from Centric Software. We will be running a questions and answer session at the end of the webinar. To submit any questions, please click on the Q&A tab on your screen and type in your questions. Please feel free to type them throughout the presentations and they'll be answered at the end. So thank you for answering those poll questions. I'd now like to hand over to Richard Hogan, who's going to talk you through Microsoft Office 365.
Good morning. So, Office 365, what is it? Office 365 is Microsoft's enterprise-grade cloud-based productivity offering. This offering provides organizations access to the online versions of key Microsoft productivity software, including Exchange, Lync, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, and Office Pro Plus. That allows users and organizations access to a number of features and functions, such as email messaging, instant messaging, President's online meetings, social, collaboration, and Office productivity. This provides a number of business values for the organizations. So providing users access to this suite of productivity tools enables business to improve employee engagement by empowering users and providing them with the tools that they are familiar with. Office 365 allows users using multiple platforms a single connected experience, whether your users are using a desktop, laptop, tablet, phone, or kiosk device. Office provides a consistent end-to-end user experience regardless of that user's location or device. It also enables teams, regardless of their locations, to effectively work together, improving productivity, engaging with external users by sharing content securely to team members in other organizations. Also helps to enhance your intranet or extranet with content which is relevant to your users, whether this is from a social stream such as Yammer or published through a traditional marketing and comms team or data coming from other line of business applications. As it is cloud-based, it allows you access to the latest version of these tools whenever they are released from Microsoft. This enables you to have the cutting-edge technology at your fingertips all the time. And stops the reliance on existing traditional infrastructure projects and the time taken to deploy or implement these tools. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Dan now to talk you through some of the 365IQ offerings and how that helps you in deploying Office 365.
Great, thanks very much for that, Richard. As Richard mentioned, I'm going to explain how Centric Software's solution allows you to get the most out of Office 365, understand where you are at present, and where you want to get to, and the steps you can take to do that. So I'll start with an introduction of the license plan options. Anyone who's looked at the different license plan options most likely will be a little bit bewildered by all of the different options which are available to you. So if we look from, if we take a slider view, we go from £1.30 for Exchange Online Kiosk, which is the kind of bare minimum email service which is available to users, all the way up to Office 365 Enterprise E4, which is absolutely everything, all of the productivity tools that you're used to, Word, Excel, etc. And that's online and offline. So the way that you can kind of think about this is the balance between risk and cost. So at the low level, if you were to take the extreme and you went for the very lowest option, then the risk is that you're not going to provide everything to your end users. At the other end, you could go for Enterprise E4 for every single one of your users. That's a higher cost, but of course a lower risk available to you. What we actually want to be able to do is balance between those two, and the way that we do that is by looking at how users are actually working now and making recommendations on what would be the best solution for them at this point in time. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail. When we think about the planning steps for Office 365, it's very similar, of course, to many projects. Firstly, we want to validate the fit of Office 365. Is it right for your organisation? Then, given that it does appear to be right, we want to prepare for migration, reduce costs up front, understand what those costs will be, reduce project risk. So we want to understand any pitfalls that there might be down the line, what incompatibilities there might be with particular devices, think about where content is stored. Because if we know all of that, then we can reduce that risk by knowing up front so that we don't stumble across these issues further down the line. We also want to optimize the timescale. So there will be some users and some devices which are able to go to Office 365 immediately. There will be some users and devices which need more work. They may be more complex. The user might be a more complex user, and by that I mean they use their Office productivity tools in a more complex manner, such as using macros and examples such as that. So the journey to efficient Office 365 usage can be split out into around about 5 stages. So firstly, we want to evaluate the users. We want to understand how the users work. And what we'll see, Richard will explain that we can use the data and insights which are provided by Centric Software's 365 IQ for the factual data that we can see about how particular users work. Content and code can use that to create personas, and on top of that, provide research into those particular personas. So it's not just how do people work based on fact, it's also talking to those users, getting the most out of them. We want to explore the costs, so ensure that that we are providing the right license plans for the right users. Then once we've gone through that, we want to create a plan, then migrate, remediate any issues that there might be, and then enhance and educate. And of course this could be in parallel with migration, but the idea is that you can get to a point where you move your end users from Office online, Office offline, onto Office 365, and then you can enhance and get more out of the licenses which are available to you, and go into more detail about that. But underpinning all of this is an understanding of usage of your users. So at each of these points, you're able to see what they do. When you're migrating, you're able to see how far they've migrated, how many people are using, and then you can provide points to educate people where you can see that they're not using the Office 365 as you might expect, and you can pinpoint that. So going back to the risk versus cost analysis I was talking about, what 365 IQ does is it sits on the devices that users use and ties back all of the information that we need to know about them to make a decision about the recommended license plan which is available to them. So what we're showing here is just a very kind of small subset of the examples of what it is that we look for, but to give you an idea, we're looking at whether the user creates documents or they just view documents. Do they actually use Office productivity tools now? Are they an online worker and an offline worker? Do they use different web storage? So we're not just looking at SharePoint, we're looking at all sorts of online storage devices, Dropbox, Box.com, etc. Do they use Link or other IM clients? So we're going into a lot of detail about that, and that then returns us the detail about the particular license plan which is ideal for that user. So here's the reality of it, what we actually see, and this is within Centric Software's SaaS infrastructure. So it's a web-based interface that anyone can log into. What we'd expect is that you've worked with content and code on this to understand the license plans which are recommended. So here we've got an example. The results which are returned are that most users are appropriate for Office Enterprise E3. Some are appropriate for 365 Pro Plus and hosted email. You can see that even a couple of users don't need a productivity suite at all. So that's the recommended plan. Of course, you don't have to go with that. You might be interested to see why particular users aren't using all of the productivity tools that you might expect them to, and to move to adjust to the right license plan. But this gives you a really good position to make those decisions. So next, going through the stages that I was talking about earlier, want to consider whether your estate is actually ready to move to Office 365. So with all of the analysis from 365 IQ, we can see in this particular example that 70% of users are ready to migrate now, and 76% of devices are ready to migrate. And what we're looking at in that particular instance is what's the migration status based upon particular prerequisites on particular devices. So it might be that the operating system needs upgrading. If it's an older version, Windows XP, for example. Does the browser need updating? Office 365 online tools need to have the latest or latest -1 version of a browser, and does .NET need upgrading? So we can see all of that up front. What it of course means is that there's not going to be a point where you attempt to migrate a user who's using a particular device and find that actually they're not able to use Office 365, because of course that's going to affect their productivity. So if you can know up front, you're in a lot better position. What we also do is look at the content, and what's really key about this is it's not the content which is statically stored, it's actually the content which is used by end users when they open up their any of their productivity tools that they use. So that could be Adobe, it could be a different Office productivity tool, or it could be a Microsoft productivity tool. But you can see all of the different locations, number of files which are stored in that particular location, and that gives you a really strong position to be in to consider how to migrate those. So where to plan your migration from. So in this instance, map drive D is where most files are stored. So that would probably be the first thing that you go for. Also, what it allows you to see is who uses documents which actually might not be supported, and we can see how they're shared. So what you may find, and we found this with a number of customers in the past, particularly councils, is that they still use Access as a kind of legacy product where Excel would be perfectly reasonable to do that. So this is a kind of example where you might need to educate your users that if it's a single user using an Access database, in fact the best thing for them would be to move to Excel. So you can understand that up front, make that change prior to making your migration steps. So we're now thinking about how we optimize timescales based on migration type. So we can obviously split this out into more detail, but essentially there's a simple migration where the user and the devices that they use are ready to be migrated. So the users are matched to the machines that they use, all of the machines meet their requirements, the storage locations are migrated, and there aren't any complex migration challenges which are identified. And as I mentioned, that's around Access databases, the way a user might use their office productivity tools now, do they use Access, etc. And then we also look at where a complex migration might need to be undertaken. So machines might not be ready, macro files identified. Is a user using a particular add-in which is only appropriate for 2010 or 2007? So there might be more complex issues there. So what we can do there is we can understand that, and we can complete the work in parallel, perform the simple migrations alongside the complex migrations, and get the optimum time frame and reduce risk as we move through the project. Richard touched on earlier the different workloads which are defined by Microsoft. So Microsoft defines these 5 different types. There's productivity tools, collaboration tools, enterprise social, email, and document sharing. What you can see from this is how many people use Microsoft productivity tools, collaboration, etc. How many are non-Microsoft users? And from that, you can actually see the scope to get the best out of your users. So in this instance, we can see enterprise social, which would relate to Yammer. There are actually no Microsoft users of enterprise social. So there's a strong opportunity to get your users onto Yammer. And with 365 IQ, you can look at this over time. So you can set targets to get more people onto Yammer or onto SharePoint, and track that over time. Richard will touch on this in more detail. Additionally, everything that I talked through, and there's quite a lot more, can be printed out in an executive summary. So, for example, those workloads, you can print that out as a PDF and provide that to users who might not necessarily be using the product. So that might be C-level executives. If you're the project manager, it's a very useful tool to be able to provide to those people, or Content and Code can provide that to you. So with that, I will pass you back over to Richard to talk through in more detail about the Content and Code process and how that kind of fits in with what I've been talking about.
Thank you, Dan. Okay. Content and Code have been probably at the forefront of helping organisations move across from the traditional sort of on-premise implementations of SharePoint, Exchange, etc., to using the Office 365 cloud productivity platforms. And what we've noticed, and it's certainly backed up with things like Gartner, for example, there, is that this change is not necessarily something that is heavily technically focused. It's much more about the culture change and the cultural shift, and the change in the ways that the actual users work and use the tools. And this is particularly true with things like SharePoint and Yammer, in which case that their traditional ways of working are being slightly changed, and that is what we've noticed and needs to be assisted with and understood when we're helping organisations to deploy and use these technologies. Now, how we try and work is we try to do a top-down, bottom-up approach, which is firstly to understand the business goals and objectives, but also then to actually talk to and understand user frustrations, user needs and user requirements, and that way to try and merge the two together to provide a solution which is easily adopted and is beneficial both to the users and to the organisation as a whole. Now, some of the top-down sort of business objectives and drivers can be categorised into some of these sort of typical scenarios. So to improve communications or to enable collaboration, to improve efficiency and productivity, reduce costs by getting rid of expensive internal infrastructure and move that across into a more streamlined hosted type solution, reducing complexity of those systems, automating process, and possibly some compliance and risk reduction activities or drivers. Now we try and take those from the business level and then try and marry those up with user requirements and experience. And we do this by following a sort of user-centric, user experience-led approach. So what we tend to do, or generally do, or what we found is a better way of doing this, is actually to engage with those users with some sort of quantitative and qualitative approaches, for example, like questionnaires, one-to-one interviews, analysis of how they work. And certainly this is where 365 IQ can help, because it helps us analyse what platforms they're using, how often they're using things like Internet Explorer or browsers, or which tools they're using on a regular basis, and helps us to identify from that side how the users are working and what is easiest for us to migrate to Office 365. But from our research in terms of the user experience processes, we tend to end up with a number of different outputs, including things like personas, for example. Now, personas is an amalgamation of various different users who follow through or present certain types of behaviour in terms of their existing usage profiles. And these can include things like percentage of time using particular tools, key frustrations with the current platform, with the current tools, even ideas about how to improve certain things. For example, users might express a preference, say, well, it would be really nice if we could have more social engagement with the tools, to share ideas or to promote certain ways of working, for example. And this enables us to start to build out a solution that not only meets the business level objectives, to increase productivity, but also to get the users involved and engaged with that. And we've certainly found over the last year or so that this has been an invaluable tool for organisations to understand how their users are actually interacting with the tools and doing their work, and then enabling us to move those into the new sort of cloud-based world with Office 365. And this is sort of where the Centric software solution sort of comes into place, because as Dan said earlier on, it helps us to identify, where content is, which content is important for the users, and then that enables us to sort of plan how we're going to migrate that. What's the priorities? What needs to be migrated first? It helps us to train the users. Again, as Dan said earlier on about the difference between single-use or limited use access databases, to sort of migrating that through to an Excel-based platform or even a custom solution within Office 365. Consolidate tools, for example, multiple IM clients, multiple file sharing options, for example, like Dropbox or something that isn't a consumer. Sorry, is a consumer product, not a enterprise-grade tool. Identifies people who can benefit from working remotely or collaborating with external users, partners, or other people that might not be on the corporate network. And can help to monitor uptake and progress from the migration tools, and from the traditional on-premise solutions to the cloud-based. So we're finding that a combination of the traditional sort of IT approach from business requirements, combining that with the UX streams that we're doing, so the user interviews, the personas, user segmentation, etc., in addition to the insights that 365 IQ is providing us, enables us to easily identify quick win situations where we can migrate users from those traditional platforms into the Office 365 suite, thus enabling organisations to increase their effectiveness, productivity, and also to help start streamlining some of those costs that were mentioned earlier on. I think now it's time to perhaps hand back to Dan.
Hi there. So, as you may be aware, that we're doing an offer jointly with Microsoft and Content and Code and Centric Software. As you've been walked through the 365 IQ product by Dan throughout this presentation, we're offering you 90 days of 365 IQ analytics funded jointly between Microsoft, Centric Software and Content and Code to support you on your journey to Office 365. So just to recap, from using 365 IQ, you'll be able to understand which Office applications are being utilized by your users, take advantage of business class email in the cloud with 365, move your documents online, and enable collaboration and sharing, create online meetings using Link Client, have yourself a private social network with Yammer. You have technical support from both Microsoft, Centric Software and Content and Code, and there's financially backed SLAs in place by Microsoft for Office 365. So I'm now going to pass over to Dan, who's going to run the Q&A part of the session. So thanks, Dan.
Hi, Neve. Thanks very much for that. So, yeah, now's your opportunity. If you just want to ask any questions as you go through this, obviously, you know, we don't have to talk through them now. If you have any specific questions to your organisation, feel free to contact us about that, or Content and Code to ask any more details. We will follow up with you as well. In case you do have any particular questions. It doesn't look like we have any questions now, so I will wrap that up now. You know, the key point here is that at whatever stage you are in on Office 365, you know, whether you're thinking about it or not, with the tool that I've talked about, 365 IQ, you can really get some very good insight, and it's a limited risk to yourself because it's available, it's backed by Microsoft, it's free of charge, so it's really just worth looking at it and seeing you know what you can get out of it, even if that at first is just to look at a particular pilot area of your business before kind of moving it on to a larger area. So yeah, with that, I'll thank Neve and Richard for presenting as well, and we'll finish the webinar there. Thanks very much.